Hello, and welcome to the True Story channel. Thank you for taking a moment to be here today, and for listening. Stories like this one often begin quietly, but sometimes they reveal something unexpected about pride, family, and the value of a person's work. Tonight's story is about a wedding. A careless sentence spoken into a microphone, and the moment when the truth changed the entire room. Have you ever been embarrassed in front of a crowd by someone who was supposed to be family? Imagine sitting in a beautiful ballroom while hundreds of guests laugh at a joke made at your expense. Now imagine discovering that the very people laughing do not know the full story yet. If you stay with me until the end of this video, I believe you will see more than just a dramatic moment at a wedding. You will understand something deeper about character, about quiet dedication, and about how the smallest actions can reveal the true value of a person. This happened only a few months ago, but the memory still feels sharp in my mind, as if every sound and every face in that room were frozen in time. My name is Hannah Brooks. I am 29 years old, and I work as a nurse at Charleston Memorial Hospital. My job is not glamorous. Most days begin beneath the harsh white lights of the emergency department, surrounded by the faint smell of disinfectant and the steady rhythm of machines monitoring fragile lives. Long shifts and sleepless nights are part of the routine, but, despite the exhaustion, I have always believed that helping people in their worst moments matters more than recognition. On the evening this story begins, I was sitting near the back of a ballroom inside the Riverside Grand Hotel overlooking the harbor in Charleston. Outside the tall windows, the lights from the city shimmered across the dark water. Inside, soft jazz drifted through the air while guests talked, laughed, and raised glasses of champagne to celebrate the wedding of Lydia Brooks, my stepsister. Lydia and I had never truly been close. Since our parents married years ago, she had always seemed to view me as someone who existed just outside her world. Still, when my father asked me to attend the wedding, I agreed. I thought it would be a simple evening. A ceremony, a few speeches, polite smiles, and then everyone would go home. But during the reception, Lydia lifted a microphone and began introducing people around the room, joking lightly as she went. The guests laughed along easily, enjoying the moment. Then she turned toward my table, smiled in a way I recognized instantly, and said into the microphone, "That over there is my stepsister Hannah. She is just a useless nurse." The room burst into laughter. I lifted my glass and pretended not to notice. What I did not realize yet was that someone else in that room was staring at me with sudden recognition. And within seconds, the entire evening was about to change. Have you ever noticed how a single careless sentence can reveal years of quiet tension hiding beneath the surface of a family? Lydia calling me a useless nurse that night sounded like a joke to everyone else in the room, but for me, it carried the weight of a history that began long before that wedding. When my father remarried, I was 15 years old, and suddenly part of a new household that never quite felt like my own. Lydia and I were close in age, yet the distance between us seemed fixed from the start. Her mother welcomed me kindly, but Lydia observed me the way someone studies a stranger who has unexpectedly appeared inside their life. She was confident, effortlessly social, and comfortable in any room filled with people. Conversations naturally drifted toward her. Laughter followed wherever she went. I moved through life differently. I preferred quiet routines, long hours studying, and eventually the demanding discipline of nursing school. Years later, I found my place inside the emergency department at Charleston Memorial Hospital, where the rhythm of the job was defined not by applause but by urgency. the environment there is very different from a ballroom. Instead of music and laughter, there are monitors beeping steadily, hurried footsteps across polished floors, and the constant awareness that someone's life may depend on decisions made within seconds. 12-hour shifts became normal for me. Some nights began before sunset and ended long after sunrise. During one of those nights, a patient arrived with severe complications following surgery. Her condition was unstable, the monitors flickering with numbers that refused to settle. The room filled with quiet tension as we worked to stabilize her. At the time, it felt like another demanding shift, one of many. Afterward, the hospital moved on. New patients arrived, and the memory faded into the background of my routine. Sitting in that wedding ballroom months later, listening to people laugh at Lydia's remark, I assumed the evening would continue the same way. But at a nearby table, an older man had begun watching me carefully, as though a forgotten memory had suddenly returned. Then he slowly stood up, and the mood of the entire room began to shift. Have you ever felt a room fall silent so quickly that the change itself feels almost physical, like the air has suddenly grown heavier? That was the moment everything shifted. The laughter that had followed Lydia's remark faded away, piece by piece, as the man who had been watching me pushed his chair back and slowly stood. His name, I would soon remember, was Edward Carter, the groom's father. Earlier in the evening, he had blended into the background, like many of the older guests, speaking quietly, observing more than participating. But now his attention was fixed entirely on me, and the focus in his eyes carried the unmistakable tension of recognition. He stepped away from his table, moving with calm deliberation, and several guests instinctively turned to watch him cross the room. On the small stage near the dance floor, Lydia still held the microphone, though the confidence in her smile had begun to falter. Edward Carter stopped a few steps from my table and raised one hand slightly, as if asking the room for patience. Then he spoke in a measured voice that carried clearly through the quiet ballroom. "Wait a moment." The words were simple, yet they seemed to steady the entire room. He studied my face again before asking a question that pulled a distant memory sharply into focus. "Aren't you the nurse from Charleston Memorial Hospital?" For a second, I hesitated, surprised by the question and the setting in which it appeared. Images surfaced in my mind, fragments from a long night shift, the emergency department lights, a patient struggling after surgery, a worried husband waiting outside a treatment room. I nodded slowly. "I think so, yes." Edward Carter stepped closer, his voice calm but firm enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Last year, my wife had severe complications after surgery." People began looking between us, curiosity replacing the earlier laughter. "You stayed with her the entire night," he continued. Then his final words settled into the room with unmistakable weight. "You were the one who noticed the problem before the surgeon even arrived." By then the ballroom had fallen completely silent, and every guest seemed to understand that the story had only just begun. What happens when the truth enters a room at the exact moment everyone thinks the story is already finished? The answer came quietly, but it carried more weight than anything said that evening. Edward Carter stood there beneath the soft lights of the ballroom, his gaze steady as he looked from me back to Lydia. Then he spoke again, his voice calm but impossible to ignore. "My wife almost died that night." The words seemed to settle over the guests like a sudden shadow. As he spoke, the memory returned to me with startling clarity. The emergency room. The bright fluorescent lights reflecting off metal equipment. The constant rhythm of monitors tracking a life that was slipping dangerously close to the edge. His wife had arrived after severe complications from surgery. Her blood pressure was dropping quickly, the readings on the monitor unstable and unpredictable. In those moments, the room had filled with quiet urgency. I remember studying the numbers again and again, feeling that instinct nurses develop when something is wrong, even before anyone says it out loud. We called the surgical team immediately. But before they could arrive, there was a long stretch of waiting that felt much longer than the clock suggested. I remained beside her bed, monitoring every change, adjusting equipment, making sure she stayed stable. Back in the ballroom, Edward Carter's voice carried across the silent tables. "Your stepsister stayed with my wife for 6 hours that night," he said while looking directly at Lydia. Several guests shifted in their chairs, their earlier amusement replaced by something closer to reflection. Then he delivered the sentence that quietly changed the entire atmosphere of the room. "She saved her life." No one laughed this time. Edward Carter continued calmly. "If that is what you call a useless nurse, then the world needs many more people like her." Lydia's confident smile had vanished completely. The music still played softly in the background, but no one seemed to hear it anymore. I remained seated, strangely calm, realizing that sometimes the truth does not need to defend itself. It only needs the right moment to be spoken aloud. Thank you for listening to this story, and if this moment made you reflect even a little about the quiet strength people carry, stay with the channel, because the next story may reveal an even more unexpected truth.